Hi guys, welcome back to another episode of the Property Source and Success Show. If you don't have a business, you can't find deals or clients consistently. And I want to talk about something a lot of people in property do not want to admit. And I really want to say this as directly as I possibly can. If you've been following the content in the podcast for a while, you will know that being direct is one of my favorite things to do. But if you have done a deal, if you have maybe invested before, if you have sourced something once or twice, but you still don't know where your next deal is coming from, or where your next investor client is coming from, or where the next bout of private investor fundraising is coming from, or your next joint venture partner is coming from, the reality is, sweet cheeks, that you do not have a business yet. You've maybe had a result or two. And there is a massive difference between the two. One deal does not make you a property protege. One deal does not make you having a fully fledged property business. One investor conversation is not a pipeline. One good month is not, a good year. And this is a bit that a lot of people want to avoid, because it's easier to cling on to what you have done than be honest about the shit that you still haven't built. And so what I really wanted to talk about on today's podcast is exactly that, because I know exactly who this episode is for. This is for the person who is not brand new to property, right? So you're not a raving novice. You're not sitting there with zero knowledge. You've probably had some form of property education in the form of courses, programs, even webinars, books, podcasts. You've probably been in these property rooms. You have listened to the podcast, you've watched the trainings, you've maybe been to the networking events. You might even have bought an investment property or two before. You might even have sourced and packaged a deal before. So from the outside looking in, you look like somebody who is quote unquote in property. But the problem is, behind closed doors, it still feels very inconsistent. It still feels very patchy. It probably feels like you're relying on luck or timing or the odd conversation or somebody randomly dropping into your lap. And to be very honest, because I've been there before, that is nothing short of absolutely exhausting. What keeps people awake, what keeps people like that awake at night, I suppose, is it's not a lack of knowledge. It's the fact that they know enough to know what is possible. They see other people doing it, but they haven't been able to turn it into something repeatable for themselves. And that gap, that major gap, is actually very frustrating. The chances are you're likely sitting thinking, well, why am I still here? Why does this feel harder than it should do? Why have I got all this knowledge from the courses that I've done, but I still don't actually have a steady stream of deals or a steady revenue from it or a steady income or a steady attracting clients properly? Why does every single month feel like I'm starting from scratch all over again? And the answer most of the time is because you do not have a repeatable system. That is it. Sounds very simple. It kind of is. And it's not because you're lazy, and it's not because you're not capable, and it's not because the market... I fucking hate it when people say that. There's always an excuse. And it's not because there's no opportunities. It is because you have not built a reliable process for finding deals, finding clients, month after month after month. And without all of that, everything feels like a show. You can be smart about this, you can be very ambitious about this, you can be credible, and you can have potential. But if you're still relying on randomness, literally the spin of a wheel, the roll of a dice, then your business, quote unquote, I'm using my air commas, is built on unstable ground. And yes, I get it. That is the part that nobody wants to hear, because most people want to believe that they're just one good deal away from making a big break. And you've maybe said to yourself, I just need more time. I need to get clearer on my strategy. That's one of my particular favorites. I'm waiting until the market levels out. I'm just getting my ducks in a row. Lord Jesus, save us. And for some people, that's true. Most of the time, it's just procrastination. It's avoidance. A lot of people are, avoiding the uncomfortable truth that they do not know how to generate opportunities on demand. They know how to recognize a good deal, and they know how to talk about property. They know all the jargon, BRRRRRRR and BMV and HMO and serviced accommodation. And they know what an investor wants in theory, but they do not have a weekly rhythm that consistently creates new opportunities. And that is why you stay stuck, because knowledge is not a system. And I really want to impress that upon you. Knowledge is not a system. You can know loads and have absolutely no pipeline. You can sound impressive and have absolutely no investors. You can have done a deal or two before and actually still not have a repeatable business model that brings that in month on month. And that's why so many people get trapped. They become busy but not effective. They consume more content and then they start to tweak their branding, change their niche, redesign their logo, spend hours overthinking what social media should look like, analysis paralysis with deals. They sit on Rightmove or Property Pal, convincing themselves that they're working on the business. But none of that actually means anything if you haven't built a simple process that you can stick to. A real business is not built on occasional wins. A real business, from a sourcing perspective, knows where the leads are coming from, knows how the conversations start, has the follow-up systems in place, has the online visibility, has a full pipeline. A real business is doing certain things at certain times every single week, whether you feel like it or not. And that is what creates momentum. It's not a hype game here. We don't need motivation. We don't need you to watch another webinar. And posting once on social media and hoping that somebody bites is absolute lunacy. What you need is repeated action. It's very boring sometimes. It's pretty unsexy most of the time. It's definitely the sort of action that nobody's going to give you a round of applause for. It's definitely not flashy enough for, an Instagram reel to go viral. The phone calls, the follow-up, the outreach, the relationship building, the checking in, the consistency, the repetition. But all of that, by the way, is exactly what you need to build trust. That is what's going to create a pipeline for you. That is what turns a bit of a side hustle into an actual business. And just a bit of a side note on that, when you treat it like an actual business, you tend to make real business profits from it, like serious money, as opposed to running it like a hobby and getting hobby results. And I think for a lot of people listening to this podcast episode, my gut tells me that there's probably another layer to it all. Many of you are capable people. A lot of my audience are corporate or ex-corporate, very much like myself. You maybe run a small business already, so you're used to being competent. You're used to being the type of person who can problem solve, figure things out. You're used to performing and doing well at a decent level in other areas of life. So when this part of your property journey feels messy and feels inconsistent, it actually hits your confidence a lot harder. I remember these days well. Keep it in mind. I'm an ex-financial analyst for the New York Stock Exchange, a pretty impressive role on paper. But when I jumped into the world of property in 2016, I hadn't a clue. It's not just about deals. It's not just about investor clients. It starts to affect how you see yourself. And then you start questioning things. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. Maybe I'm missing something. Everybody else seems to know something I don't. Maybe I just don't know how to find the deals. Maybe I'm not credible enough. Again, most of the time, that's not the real issue. The issue is that you're not incapable. The issue is that you're trying to build something serious without a proper operating system behind it. And when there's no system, everything goes to every week feels like failure. Every ignored message, feels like another rejection. Every deal that falls out of bed is proof that it's not working. It's not. It's proof that your process isn't strong enough yet. And that is a very different problem. And it's a very different problem because it can be fixed. But you do have to be honest about it. You have to stop dressing up inconsistency as, just getting your ducks in a row and you're just in the building phase. You have to stop calling random activity momentum. It's not. You have to stop pretending that just because you've had one or two results before that you have a business. No, you don't. If you cannot predictably generate deals or investor clients, then your sourcing income will always feel really unstable. And that's when your confidence disappears. Really important. You're capable of more. There is an opportunity here. You know that this could be something serious, but right now you're still too inconsistent. You're still too dependent on chance. You need to make it simpler, not more complicated, simpler. You need a repeatable system for deal flow. That means you need to know where your deals are coming from consistently, who you're speaking to, how often are you following up with them, what is the criteria, how do you assess that criteria quickly, how do you stay visible in the market. You also need a repeatable system for investor client flow. That means you need to know how you're starting conversations, where you're starting conversations, how are you positioning yourself, how are you building trust, how often and where and how do you do outreach? How and what does your follow-up look like? You need to know how you move somebody from showing interest to being a fully fledged client. And this is what people are missing. You're not missing more education. You're not missing more information. You are not missing another notebook full of ideas. You need structure. And let me tell you something else. The person who wins at the game of property sourcing is usually not the person who knows the most. It is the one who repeats the basics for long enough. the one who gets into a rhythm, gets consistent, the one who stops chasing the next shiny penny and builds a machine around the fundamentals. That, my friend, is the person who gets the results. So if you are listening to this today and it's hitting a nerve, I really want you to hear me. If your sourcing business feels random at the moment, if your lead flow is patchy, if your deal flow is inconsistent, if your investor generation is stop kidding yourself. And that's not me being harsh for the sake of it. This is me trying to help you get honest enough to actually change it.